I made a prison escape game.
We made a prison escape game with active ragdolls. And if you're an idiot and you don't know what active ragdolls are, I'll have my generous colleague explain it to you.
Active ragdolls work on the basis of having
gravity,
multiple
and
animations.
animations.
So basically, this guy tries his best to mimic this guy while trying to fight gravity.
Oh, gravity, you cruel
Using active ragdolls seemed like a really fun challenge, but a problem we faced was finding a theme that would also support this core mechanic to the game. One of the first real challenges we faced naturally was actually figuring out how to rake these ragdolls and make them work in the game.
Technically, conceptualizing something to rig a ragdoll to was the first challenge. As you can clearly see, I kept it pretty simple. This is not because I'm lazy, this is to make the development process easier.
So naturally, being prisoners, both their hands and their feet are bound together, and you have to move around in this funny hopping manner in order to get around the map.
This looked quite neat. You know what doesn't look neat? This. I hate this.
So we had a little conundrum when we first tried to figure out how the player would move about the play space. If you're a sane developer, you would probably take the route of having forces applied to the rigid bodies attached to the player. Well, unfortunately, there are no sane developers around. We decided that it would only be logical to have the player flop about like a fish, based off of ragdoll physics. So we had Jed with a silent D and a load of objects to play around with, but no actual play space to have all of them together. So we set about fixing this problem by using the Unity tile map system.
Of course, there was the process of actually making the tiles. This took a few iterations, mainly because I'm stupid.
Tests of strength, size, and geometrical precision.
Something was still quite missing though, and while we have all of these great objects and stuff, you might notice that there's no actual lighting, and more specifically, no shadows at all. And with the mood that we're going for with this game, these were an absolute must, so I also added those.
Something, however, was still amiss. A sense of impending doom. So I made the scariest thing I can think of. The law.
The cop was a pretty obvious addition to the game, and he works much in the same way as Jeb with his silent D does, which is to say that it is a ragdoll dummy that tries to mimic some animations, and he sure does look like a dummy. Now, it wouldn't be a real cop if he didn't have some good old
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so around this point is where I started to realize it's hard. So imagine taking years of learned animation experience to craft finely made running animations, only for physics to...
So, Jeb with the silent D has a few methods of getting around the map. This includes diving, scooting on his butt, doing little hops, throwing himself off a ceiling, and also hoisting himself up over ledges. Well, there are also a couple of objects that require some tool in order to progress, such as vents needing screwdrivers. This not only allows for a very low skill floor, but also a really high skill ceiling and a lot of expression. Well, what better way of expressing how much of an idiot you are than having all of your friends there to make fun of you afterwards? I'd also like to express my depression after having to add multiplayer to this game.
Due to my colleague's condition, we've both come to the conclusion that in any future projects, we would have to choose between either active ragdolls or multiplayer, but never both. Unless this video gets 69,000 likes.
After all of the fun I had adding active ragdolls into the game and making a near finished product, adding multiplayer meant I basically had to do everything over multiple times. One of the biggest issues I was facing was synchronizing the active ragdolls over the network. This is notoriously a pretty hard problem to solve, and is the reason why in games like GTA you might not actually see the same ragdoll as someone else witnessing the same events as you are. However, it was obviously a very crucial part of this game, and luckily I've gotten it to a point where it's relatively stable, but unfortunately the cop is still a little weird, but I'm not trying to think about him right now. The next part was even more painful, so strap in, it's about to get technical.
I'm gonna go find like a anthill to kick outside or something.
The next fundamental part of our game that would cause me PTSD and lots of sleepless nights was object ownership over service. This isn't something that most games have to deal with, as in most games, the objects that you might interact with are limited solely almost to you. However, in our game, someone or two people might be able to grab onto the same object, like for instance a basketball or a crate. And in cases like these, things can get a little weird, to say the least. The workaround I found to this was a similar solution to what Rocket League actually used, in which case whenever a player comes into collision with the ball in Rocket League, they temporarily gain ownership over that object, and thusly they can move it around, and the other clients will also notice it moving. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the main reason why the cop is wigging out the way that he is, but I'm gonna worry about that in another day.
Are you done yet?
Do I look like I'm done?
I think I saw another anthill out there.
So level design is a pretty hard thing in this game of ours, and you wouldn't think it to be that way, since the theme dictates how most of everything is going to look. But that doesn't really allow us to know how to put levels together in a way that's not only challenging, but also engaging.
Well, for some ungodforsaken reason, we decided to let me have the first crack at making a level.
What the hell is this all about? I'm a solo developer now, so I took it upon myself to conjure up a room that was fun to play in. It took a couple of tries, but I feel like the one that I've landed on is pretty okay. It teaches you about things like the movement, vents, and climbing, which are going to be instrumental in our design philosophy moving forward. So after setting up this start level, I decided that I was going to breathe life into it by adding some fore and background objects into the scene, just to see whereabouts we're going with this. And I think it turned out really okay.
So after a month of painstaking game development, we've got something that's pretty neat. So we finally reached the point where we're putting the game on Steam, which is also painful. So just go and wishlist it, you know, it helps. And while you're at it, subscribe and like the video and share it with someone. If you don't, bring it to your house and smoke out of your weed.
Wishlist the game on Steam, and also like and subscribe. Have you seen my soap?